At 2:30 a.m. on August 2, 2018, Apple quietly became worth $1 trillion. No parade, no bell ringing on Wall Street, just a number updating on a screen. And here's the uncomfortable part. At that exact moment, Apple was not inventing anything new. No breakthrough device, no revolutionary technology, no new category. The world's most valuable company was built not on constant invention, but on control. Control of products, control of margins, control of attention, and most importantly, control of behavior. That's the real story of how Apple became the most valuable company on Earth, and why its success is far less romantic than we like to believe. This matters right now because Apple isn't just a tech company anymore. It's a financial system. It touches how you work, how you pay, how you communicate, how you store your memories. Entire economies now move at the speed of Apple's product cycles. To understand Apple's dominance, you have to strip away the mythology. Forget the black turtleneck, forget the garage, forget the idea that this was all about genius. This is a story about incentives, timing, and one of the most disciplined business models ever built. Let's start at the part everyone skips. In 1997, Apple was almost dead. Not struggling, not in trouble, dead. The company was 90 days away from running out of cash. Its market share was collapsing. Its product line was a mess. There were printers, cameras, personal digital assistants, dozens of confusing Macs with names no one remembered. Apple was losing money on almost everything it sold. Wall Street had written it off. Then Steve Jobs returned, and the first thing he did wasn't to invent the iPhone. He killed things. Projects, teams, entire product lines. He reduced Apple's sprawling catalog to 4 products: consumer desktop, consumer laptop, professional desktop, professional laptop. That was it. This wasn't creativity, it was survival math. Every additional product added cost, complexity, inventory risk, and distraction. Apple didn't need more ideas, it needed focus. This pattern would define Apple forever. But focus alone doesn't build the world's most valuable company. The next move did. Jobs understood something most tech founders ignored at the time. Computers were becoming commodities. Faster chips, cheaper memory, thinner margins. If Apple competed on specs, it would die. So Apple stopped selling computers and started selling experiences. The iMac wasn't revolutionary because of what was inside it. It was revolutionary because of how it made people feel. Friendly, simple, different. While competitors advertised clock speeds and RAM, Apple advertised joy, and people paid more for it. That was the first quiet shift. Apple wasn't optimizing for volume, it was optimizing for margin. This is where the uncomfortable math begins. Most tech companies chase users first and profits later. Apple did the opposite. By the early 2000s, Apple had already trained its customers to expect higher prices. But higher prices only work if you control the whole system. Which is why Apple's next move wasn't a computer, it was music. The iPod is remembered as a beautiful device. What's forgotten is that it was a Trojan horse. The real innovation wasn't the scroll wheel, it was iTunes. Apple didn't just sell a music player, it built an entire legal distribution system for digital music at a time when piracy was destroying the industry. Record labels were desperate, consumers were confused. Apple stepped in as the middleman, and Apple took a cut. For the first time, Apple controlled hardware, software, and content. That triangle would become the company's greatest weapon. Then came the iPhone. And this is where the myth really falls apart. The iPhone wasn't first. BlackBerry existed, Nokia existed, touchscreens existed. What Apple did was reframe the phone. It wasn't a communication device anymore. It was a pocket computer. But again, the hardware wasn't the real play. The App Store was. This was the moment Apple stopped being a product company and became a platform tax collector. Every app, every in-app purchase, every subscription, 30%. At scale, that number is enormous. Developers took the risk, Apple took the rent. And Apple enforced the rules. If you wanted access to hundreds of millions of users, you played by Apple's terms. No sideloading, no alternative payment systems, no negotiation. This wasn't about innovation, it was about leverage. The iPhone exploded. Apple's revenue skyrocketed, but something interesting happened behind the scenes. Apple's profit margins didn't just grow, they stabilized. Most hardware companies live in cycles. Big launches, then price erosion. Apple broke that pattern. Why? Because it wasn't selling phones, it was selling lock-in. Once you bought an iPhone, you bought into iMessage, into iCloud, into AirPods, into the App Store. Switching became painful. Not impossible, just inconvenient enough. This is the hidden mechanism most people miss. Apple didn't win by having the best individual products. It won by making the cost of leaving feel emotionally expensive. Photos, chats, apps, ecosystems, all softly tethered together. And Apple charged premium prices for the privilege. By 2015, Apple was generating more profit than Google, Microsoft, and Facebook combined from one product line, the iPhone. That should have been terrifying because dependence is fragile. If iPhone sales slowed, the entire empire was at risk. This is where the story gets darker. Instead of chasing another breakthrough device, Apple doubled down on monetization. Services, Apple Music, iCloud storage, Apple TV Plus, Apple Arcade, Apple Pay. Each one small on its own, together massive. Services revenue is recurring, predictable, high margin. It's the holy grail of corporate finance. By 2023, Apple's services business alone was larger than most Fortune 100 companies. And it required no factories, no shipping containers, no raw materials, just software and control. Meanwhile, Apple continued doing something that confused critics. It stopped chasing market share. Android dominated global smartphone volume. Apple didn't care, because Apple captured the majority of profits. This is the quiet irony. The most valuable company in the world doesn't sell the most devices. It sells the most expensive ones, and it convinces people they're worth it. Then came the financial engineering. Apple didn't just make money, it optimized how money moved. Despite sitting on hundreds of billions of cash, Apple borrowed money, cheap money. Why? Because interest rates were low and debt was tax efficient. Apple used that borrowed money to buy back its own stock, trillions of dollars over time. Buybacks reduced share count. Reduced share count boosted earnings per share. Boosted earnings per share pushed the stock higher. This wasn't magic, it was math. Legal, boring, incredibly effective. Apple became a machine that converted stable cash flows into rising stock prices, and Wall Street loved it. But beneath the surface, the risks never disappeared. Apple depends heavily on China for manufacturing, on one product for revenue, on regulators staying slow. Antitrust pressure is rising. Governments are questioning the App Store tax. Developers are pushing back. Consumers are noticing prices creeping up. Innovation cycles are slowing. The iPhone is no longer revolutionary, it's iterative. And that brings us to the present. Apple is still the most valuable company in the world, but it's no longer a story about invention. It's a story about maintaining dominance in a system it designed. Every upgrade, every subscription, every locked feature. Apple's real product is stability. Predictable cash flows, predictable margins, predictable behavior. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If Apple didn't win by being the most innovative, if it didn't win by being the cheapest, if it didn't win by selling the most, what does that say about how modern capitalism actually rewards companies? And more importantly, if Apple ever loses control of its ecosystem, does the whole illusion crack at once? Or has Apple already built something too embedded to fail?